I'm now calling this May 15th, 2024 special board meeting of Santa Rosa City Schools Board meeting to order. If you would all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. All right. So we are now going to move on to public comment on agenda items only. If you have a public comment, please complete a blue card, get it turned in. And the only item on the agenda today is item B1, strategic priorities review. Do we have any public comments? There will be no other time to comment. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Margie Brady Long, and I'm a teacher in the district. And our current priorities span so much that it's impossible to tell what we think is the most important. And with our limited funding and in general our limited resources, it would be fantastic if we were more focused and not so broad, in my humble opinion. So I implore you to thin your amazing ideals to the things that are the most important, so that we all know this is the direction we're headed, and then we can be clear about the road posts to our improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. Is there anyone else? Okay. No one else. So we will now move on to our discussion action items, and that will be item B1, strategic priorities review. I'll hand it over to Superintendent Turnell.
Thank you, President Medina, members of the board, those who are with us in person and online. Tonight, we bring forward an anticipation of the potential review and revision of our strategic priorities. As the board knows and the community may know, these priorities were revised back in 2019, and they technically sunset this year in 2024. So we are trying to start early to be able to navigate the interest of the board in reviewing and potentially revising these strategic priorities. And I would like to welcome Dr. Bay Jones, who will be our facilitator tonight for this process. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Jones. Welcome.
Thank you, and good evening. Wonderful to be here. As we begin, I want to tell you a little about me so you can see how I fit into this process today. I am a parent of 2 children in Santa Rosa City Schools, and I live with my family in this community. I was also a teacher for many years, starting as a kindergarten teacher in East Palo Alto, with a dominantly Spanish-speaking group of children, at which time I did not speak Spanish. As a result of my desire to be the best teacher I could be for them, I learned some pretty decent Spanish. I have taught in the public and private schools, not only in California, but also in Massachusetts, Alabama, and North Carolina. I have a dual PhD in anthropology and educational policy, and have worked as an institutional researcher and dean at a college. I am a woman of color, and the focus of my work has been on equity. In terms of my most recent work with teachers, I have taught in the School of Education at SSU and also created the equity courses at SCO. Until recently, I was the director of equity in the Rincon Valley School District. Today, I am here above all because you lead the schools my children attend, and I care deeply about this community. and about the success of our district. As probably the most diverse board of trustees in our county with an unwavering commitment to equity, the work of identifying and communicating your priorities is of critical importance, especially now. I thank you for trusting me to work with you on this process. I've prepared a presentation with some activity and reflection pieces. After the presentation, we can decide on next steps and to continue the conversation. Thank you. Give me a moment here. I might need a little bit of technical assistance. It's stop sharing. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So to get us started, I have a grounding video. This is one of us. We have here a restorative justice practitioner in the Pioneer High School. And I was at a presentation that he gave a couple of weekends ago for our Pomo Nation. And I asked his permission to tape this and to share it with you this evening.
To help our community, you know, and I get to do other things. I get to go speak at different tribal events. We just did one up in Bear River, the power of change. The power of change is a big thing. We all have our history, we all have our setbacks, we all have our addictions or something that we were holding on to. But when you change, when you have that power to be able to know that something good and better can happen, that's when it happens. But we're always holding on. Sometimes you gotta let that go. Sometimes you gotta move forward. Sometimes you gotta move on from that hurt and that feeling, that emotion. And it's important. And things like this today, you know, the dancing, the healing of the dance, the medicine of the dance is a good thing, and we need it. Us Native people need it. And we got to continue it. We got to continue it together. And if we don't, then it doesn't exist. But that's what we're working for.
So how do you respond personally to change? Really thinking about that, thinking that change is always happening. For some of us, at some times, it's scary, it's exciting. These are all feelings that energize us, can cause us pause, can cause us to not hear or see one another, can cause harm. So we want to think about all of the aspects of change. And here I'm going to just share some possible adjectives. How does change look for our community? John F. Kennedy shared with us, change is the law of life. And those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. So some adjectives on how change looks: diverse, dynamic, evident, gradual, incremental, pervasive, responsive, systemic, transformative, and varied. Is there anything that we should add to this list? If so, speak it out loud.
Intimidating.
I was
Intimidating.
going to say scary.
Scary.
Tense.
Tense.
Transparent.
Transparent. Others? All right, thank you.
Welcome.
How does
Changes-
change
Welcome. I want to say one more. Welcome. That change is welcome.
feels welcoming, feels embracing, right? Feels possible. Thank you. How does change feel? Dolores Huerta shared with us, every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars, to change the world. So some feelings associated with change. Anxiety-inducing, challenging, collaborative, disruptive, empowering, energizing, frustrating, hopeful, reflective, and uncertain. Is there anything that we want to add here?
Encouraging
Encouraging.
and transformative.
Transformative, powerful. Love it. All right.
Can I say tense again?
You may.
And I was thinking uncomfortable, but also exciting.
Yeah, exciting and tense. It's all of these things. And it's not necessarily one after the other. They can be all at the same time. I think you were going to say something.
I always like to think of change in video game terms where it's, leveling up. You're going through something and growing and gaining all that knowledge of what you went through to be bigger or better or stronger or more intuitive. So just
Right.
that leveling up that is available through change.
Yeah, definitely. Change can feel like wisdom. Right? So for our students, what should or must or does change mean for our community, for our students? Barack Obama shared with us this idea that change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. So to review our strategic goals, I'd like for us to keep in the circle some questions, some considerations. Which priorities resonate with you and why? Do any stand out above others or as more timely and important? Do any stand out as less urgent or relevant? And how do we monitor or measure these particular goals? These aren't necessarily quantifiably measurable. Some of them might be. Qualifying how we look, how we think, how we know other people are thinking about our strategic goals is also a measure, right? One of the things that I noticed that you do that is really unique and special is that each board agenda has a tracking system where you have highlighted your 7 priorities and tracked which ones a particular presentation is addressing. You might want to, at some future date, quantify that information. Are you having presentations on priority 1 and not on priority 6? It's a really wonderful visual and a quick way just to take the pulse of your community. Other ways that you can measure include, of course, SIPSAs, LCAP, PPIS. What others? Other data sources that are external to the district and in the community might be the Stop It app, town halls, youth panels. I see most of you out in the community. I know that you are listening to our youth who are speaking out at panels, on youth panels. What are they saying? Conversations afterwards can be data, can be sources of information. How are the goals messaged and seen in the daily actions at our schools? I think Teacher Margie was alluding to this. How do I live these priorities? Strategic priorities, they're due for an update. I want to honor the space, the time, the commitment, the love, the care, the courage that a group in 2019, that some of you may have been a participant in that group, took to come up with this beautiful list. Because as we reflect on this list, revise this list, revamp this list, we needn't do so in a way that is dismissive of their work. We can honor their work and at the same time hold space for the new possibilities. So modeling that for our students, right? Revisions, rewrites, always possibilities for change. So what resonates for you? What feels relevant now? Will that feel relevant in 5 years from now? Do we revise? Do we edit? Do we want to rank and prioritize? Do we want to minimize? These are things for us to be thinking about this evening. While we're doing this, keeping our center on our students. So with that in mind, I went out and asked our students, middle schoolers in our community, to share with me their voices, to share with me what resonated for them in our goals, in our priorities. And in doing that, when I was having them read these out loud, I said, oh my gosh, I should capture this. And so I asked them, I said, do you think, and I explained what I was doing, and I was talking to big people, and these people make the big decisions about the schools, and they were really intrigued, by the way. I suspect that they might want to come and participate at some future date. But I asked their parents, would it also be okay with you if I recorded this? And I got 7 people's permission. And so these are our middle schoolers. And as they're reading, I want you to listen to their voices. I want you to listen for the pauses in their voices where they may have unintentionally changed a word. They're living what they're saying. How did they change it to maybe make it feel more real for them?
Life Ready Learners. SRCS supports students to embrace their identities and claim their own agency in order to navigate diverse, complex, and constantly changing environments by developing the following capacities: literacy, inquiry, investigation, collaboration, creativity, communication, problem solving, critical thinking, empathy, civic participation, and cultural consciousness.
From what they read, I want you to take the highlighter that I put up there and think about 3 words that stand out most for you. There's a highlighter up in the front. And on the second page of your handout, you can just highlight the words. And eye contact will let me know that I can move on. Look at that. I've still got it. So we're going to repeat this activity for the next 6, okay? Whole person.
SRCS recognizes our responsibility to develop and care for the whole person so that each is mentally, emotionally, and physically healthy. We commit to policies, practices, and relationships that help ensure each person is safe, engaged, supported, and challenged.
Thank you for that eye contact. Look at that. I'm going to move to the next one. High quality staff.
SRCS values and supports great growth-minded professionals. We commit to provide collaborative, high-quality professional development to staff members so that they can successfully educate and support students. SRCS commits to fairly compensating staff.
Okay. Sure. All right. Next one. Teaching and learning environment and resources.
SRCS will provide safe and clean schools. We will provide flexible learning environments that are conducive to teach and learn SRCS and commit to supporting teachers with current tools and training to support pedagogical leadership and innovation. SRCS believes in building a staff that reflects that students will serve.
And I want to share with you that this young man recorded this 3 times. And I asked him which one he wanted you to hear. He selected this one. And I asked him why. And he said, because conducive, I don't know what that means. And pedagogical is a weird word. And I said, I'll be sure to relay that information to you. So when we're thinking about messaging, who are our messengers? Are these words that are common in our vernacular? They're common in my vernacular, Dr. Jones, right? But do my kids know what conducive means? Pedagogical? Are there other words for those things? Possibly, right? You get where I'm going. Next one, equity and excellence.
SRCS grounds our work in a deep understanding of students' identities and the historical and cultural context in which we all operate. SRCS will remove barriers and create structures that provide opportunities to further personal and academic student success. SRCS believes in student-centered, differentiated practices leading to equitable teaching and learning.
I think there was a little bit of intentionality between changing the word believes from believes that student-centered. He changed it to believes in student-centered. That's deep, yeah? Think about it. All right, I'm going to move to the next one. 2 more are left. So family engagement and community partnership.
Family engagement and community partnerships. SRCS understands the value of engaging our students' families in our larger community. SRCS commits to providing its resources and educational opportunities to families equitably and developing lasting partnerships with our community to deepen and expand student success.
And this young lady does know what equity means, but equitably was a different word for her. When I explained it, she says, oh, that's like equity. And I said, yes. So she knew. She said that in her class, they were talking about this. Of course, I leaned in and said, what were you talking about? All right, and our final one.
Sustainable funding. SRCS believes that the chronic underfunding of public education in California is unacceptable and undermines the health of our community. The current funding levels limit student outcomes and staff compensation. The SRCS board commits to working with our community to create additional funding opportunities and to being consistent and fierce advocates to full and fair funding from the state of California.
This young man should probably go tell Tony Thurman what we think. Huh? So as you're finishing up, are there any words that you'd like to add? In the far right column is some space for words that you'd like to add. Next, we're going to see what our students selected, their 3 words. Creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, emotionally, relationships, supported, high quality, professional development. Committed, supporting, leadership, identities, historical, cultural, commits, opportunities, success, underfunding, compensation. Opportunities was mentioned twice. We have a total of 20, but opportunities was mentioned twice. That's the 21. What I want to invite you to do now is to look at the ones that you've highlighted and to look at what our students selected, and where you have a commonality, if you could circle those. So I've given you a colored pencil, and if you can circle those. So when you're done, Superintendent Trunell is going to help us by listing upon our poster board the ones that are circled, and then she's going to hang those up behind you. So for life-ready learners,
Critical thinking.
and we can just go down the row. And if you don't have any, just say none.
Well, it's cultural consciousness, but cultural.
I also put cultural consciousness and critical thinking.
Critical thinking, cultural consciousness.
Problem solving. And are there any that we're missing that we wanted to add?
Agency.
Say it again.
Agency.
Agency.
I mean, these are the ones that are on the right or that we highlighted.
So just on the right-hand side, if there's any wording that you feel is missing from this message that
Okay.
you want
Oh, I
to see
see.
added,
So agency was not missing. I think agency is important.
agency. Perfect. So we can add agency. And let's go ahead and go to number 2.
Develop.
You one, just one.
Was that
Repeat
develop?
it, Jeremy, repeat it for.
Develop.
Back to
Relationships.
Relationships.
emotionally.
Emotionally.
Had relationships as well.
Relationships.
I also had relationships.
Great. And are there any missing that we need to add? Okay. How's this feeling for you? Okay. Let's move to the next one.
Professional development and support students. Yes.
Compensation. Compensation.
Compensation.
I also put compensating. And the word up there was success. I did successfully educates. I don't know if that was the same section.
To add the word success.
The students listed success, and I had successfully educate highlighted here. So I don't know if it's the same one.
Successfully educate. Yep. Let's put those. Successfully educate.
I didn't have any circled, but I wanted to add the word trust.
Trust. Good.
I wanted to add value.
Value. Value. Any others? Okay. Let's move to number 4. Teaching and learning and environment and resources. None? Okay.
Supporting.
Supporting.
Um, the word the students put up there was leadership, and I had highlighted the whole concept, pedagogical leadership and innovation, but leadership.
Okay, so we'll highlight leadership and pedagogical and innovation. Is that what you said?
And just
Kind of the whole
leadership's
phrase,
fine.
kind of that whole phrase resonates for you.
It was one concept to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I've got it marked on my paper, just with brackets around it. President, I just put pedagogical leadership innovation. Thank you. And want to maybe move over.
I wanted to add colorful, beautiful, artistic, creative.
Colorful, beautiful, artistic, and creative. Wow. I have to say, I see that environment now with those words. I can see it.
I
There's
also had supporting.
supporting. And are there others that we've missed that we want to add? I know you joined us a few moments late. Don't feel any pressure, but if you have anything that you would like to add, feel free to. Okay. So let's move to number 5, priority number 5.
Provide opportunities.
Provide opportunities, equity and excellence. Yes.
Actually, all three of mine were there.
Hey.
So I'll pick one. Cultural.
Say that one.
Cultural.
Cultural. You can also add all 3 that were there.
Well, students' identities, historical and cultural context.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Students' identity
Student's identity. Got it.
and the historical and cultural context.
Historical and cultural context. Good. Thank you.
Mine were also identities, student identities, and provide opportunities as well.
Did you say ethnicities?
Identities.
Identities?
And provide opportunities, the top one.
Great. Thank you.
So I think things to add here, balancing the buzzwords of equity with the way kids talk. I think it's just anti-racist.
Anti-racist.
And instead of kind of historical and cultural, this is, again, equity buzzwords, but structural and institutional.
Structural and institutional.
Kind of like not just the way things are, but why they are the way things are.
Yeah. Do you have any that you'd like to add?
Circled opportunities.
Oh, we can't hear you that well.
Opportunities.
Opportunities. Thank you. Opportunities as well. Okay. And any that we'd like to add?
I really like the removing barriers and creating structures. Both. It's kind of like a tie. One
Mhm.
goes with the other.
Removing barriers and creating structures. So right before we take that one away, we want, oh, is there no space? Okay. Remove barriers and create structures. Good, good. Okay, let's move to number 6 then. Did you have any?
None.
None?
Success.
Success.
I had none. I didn't have any circled.
None? Okay. That also might be telling, right? Yeah. I have to think about that one. I'm going to put a big pin there. So right now we just have success, family engagement and community partnership. Are there any words missing?
I can share the ones I highlighted.
Say that one more time.
I can share the ones I highlighted, but they're
Yeah.
not missing.
I think what's missing is relation, like relationship,
Relationship.
being in relation, being in circle.
Inclusion.
Inclusion. Relationship, inclusion. And President, would you like to see any that you highlighted, just claim those as missing?
I highlighted families, community, and partnerships, but I think it's all tied to like relationship.
Okay.
And partnerships, I think, is really important. to
Okay,
me.
great. The partnership piece.
Belonging.
Mm. Partnership and belonging. Great. Colorful. And there were several words that we've used a couple of times, and thank you. I see that you put the check marks by those. So those will definitely be ones that we want to see incorporated. And then number 7, we have our sustainable funding.
I have underfunding and
Underfunding.
opportunities.
Underfunding and opportunities.
One more check for underfunding too, Anna.
One more check next to underfunding.
Another, but I extended it to chronic underfunding.
I didn't circle underfunding because I didn't highlight it, but I put an underline under unacceptable, but it was unacceptable tied to the underfunding. So I'll say underfunding. Unacceptable. Exactly.
So I have chronic, I have unacceptable, I have underfunding highlighted with 2 check marks. Other important words that we include here?
So I also have underfunding, but opportunities, and I think you have that there too. Yeah.
Opportunities. Mhm. Do you feel like that might be connected to California? Just thinking about our funding process as an opportunity. Okay. Are there words that we need to add?
I like talking about fierce advocacy.
Fierce advocacy. Mm.
Yeah, I highlighted fierce advocates.
Mhm. And maybe some of the students don't understand what that word means, right? It doesn't mean that we can't use the language, but how are we investing time then in ensuring that they understand that language, right? What does it mean to be an advocate? What does advocacy look like?
I think it'd be a beautiful process to investigate how to involve them as students in that advocacy, how to show them the way of the amount of hours
Yeah.
and effort that someone like Director Flores puts into advocating fiercely for
Right.
funding within our state. How can they be part of that process? What can ignite that passion at a young age so they carry it with them and are a part of the process early?
Right, right. Youth ambassador aspects, right? What's already going on at some of our school sites that we need to highlight and celebrate? All opportunities there. So if there isn't anything else to add, I just want to have those up. My plan is to sit with this information, mull it over, and to come up with some draft language that is inclusive of what we have up here, okay? Oh, you're not mic'd, so, oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. So the added words have the cross next to them. Thank you. It's great. Okay. I mean, really? Okay. So when we're thinking about care, when we're thinking about respect, when we're thinking about language, we're usually thinking through our lens, what this word means to us, to our community, to our experiences. And when we're thinking about the community as a whole, we know that oftentimes our understandings are different. And so I wanted to capture some of the variation in some of the common words that we use, like care. What does that look like? Does it look different in different communities? Does it act different? Does it feel different? Right? And when we're talking cross communities, are we ensuring that what we mean by the word is what they're hearing from the word? So Nell Noddings, back in 1984, brought this concept of care into the educational environment. She really started saying, while we're teaching, kids need to know more than the facts. They need to know that we're present. They need to know that we care. She started this work, and what happened is it took off, and it's kind of created its own life force at this point. But I wanted to start with that nexus where the word originated from in the context of education with Nell Noddings. And thinking about care in the white community. Does that look different? Does that feel different? I know as a biracial person, oftentimes I am talking in two different communities, with my white mother and with my Black father. And sometimes these communities are using the same language, but have very different understandings and meanings behind it. So I just want to bring this to our attention as we're thinking about new language. Is it diverse? Does it have a shared cross-cultural understanding? If not, how do we give that to it? How do we ensure that it does? So Nell Nodding said, caring to me is simply kindness in action. And this is a teacher who is going to describe caring, right? Very passionate. What I want you to do while you're watching this is on the final page, you have a lot of space to write down phrases, things that are said in these videos. They don't necessarily resonate with you, but they stand out for some reason. And after we've gone through this process, I'm going to ask each of you to share one of the phrases and why you selected that one. And I'll start with myself, just to give an example, okay? So this one is 6 minutes. The rest of them are shorter than that, 4 to 3 minutes, all right?
It's 4 a.m. I've struggled for the last hour to fall back asleep, but I can't. Yet again, I'm tossing and turning, unable to shut down my brain. Why? Because I'm stressed. I'm stressed about my students. I'm so stressed that the only thing I can think to do is to take my thoughts and write them down tonight and vow to myself that tomorrow I'm going to tell students the truth, the real truth I've been needing to say. This is what students really need to hear. First, you need to know that I care about you. In fact, I may care about you more than you care about yourself. And I care about you more than your grades and your test scores, more than your GPAs and your SATs, more than the state-required benchmark minimum that tells me how much I'm supposed to care. I care about you as a person. And because I care, I need to be honest with you. Do I have your permission to be honest both in what I say and how I say it? Here's the thing. Teachers lose sleep because of you every week. But before I tell you why, there's something you need to understand about school. You see, academic learning is not the main event of school. It never has been, and it probably never will be. Yes, algebra, essay writing, the judicial process, Spanish, all are important. All can change your life. They are events, but they are not the main event. The main event of school is dealing with the harshness of life, learning how to deal with adversity, learning how to deal with harshness as simple as a forgotten locker combination, to obnoxious peers, to gossip, to being doubted by others, to doubting yourself, and still through all of it, pushing to be the best version of yourself no matter what. The main event of school is conquering adversity. It is your resilience in conquering the main event, adversity, that truly prepares you for life after school. Because mark my words, school is not the last time you will face great difficulty. Yes, you will have moments more beautiful than you can imagine, but you will also confront tragedy, frustration, fear, and doubt in the years to come. You shouldn't be worried about the fact that you will face great adversities. You should be worried because you are setting yourself up to fail at overcoming them. Here's the real reason why teachers lose sleep because of you every single week. You are failing the main event of school. You are quitting. And you may not think you are quitting, but you are, because quitting wears many masks. For some of you, quitting looks like throwing the day away and not even picking up a pencil to try to write a sentence or a fraction because you think you can't, or it doesn't matter, or it's not worth it, but it is. What you write is not the main event. The fact that you choose to take charge of your own doubt, your own weakness, your own boredom in order to write when you get challenged, that is the main event. Some of you quit by skipping class on a free education, a privilege that was paid for, bled for, died for by millions of people who came before you. Being punctual is not the main event. The main event is delaying your temptation and investing in your own intelligence, understanding that sometimes short-term pain leads to long-term gain, and that great people make great sacrifices for a greater good. For others, you quit by throwing disrespect at adults who ask you to go to class. Bowing to authority is not the main event. The main event is learning how to problem solve maturely, not letting your judgment be tainted by the stains of emotion. It's having grace and tact when every fiber of your being wants to hit or scream or run away. I see some of you quit by not taking opportunities, chances after chances after chances to pass a class. The main event is not having some letter, some number tell you that you are worthy. The main event is pulling your crap together and making hard choices and hard sacrifices, even when it seems impossible. It's finding hope in the hopeless, courage in the chasm, guts in the grave. What you need to see is that every time you take the easy way out, you are building a habit of quitting, and it will destroy your future and annihilate your happiness if you let it. Our society couldn't care less for quitters. Life will leave you sad, depressed, and poor if you can't courage up and learn how to deal with hardship. You are either the muscle or the dirt. You either take resistance and grow stronger, or you erode in the wind. So know this right now. As long as you're in my life, I'm not gonna let quitting be easy for you. I'm going to challenge you, confront you, push you, coach you. You can whine, you can throw a tantrum, you can stomp and scream and swear, and guess what? Tomorrow, I'll be right here, smiling and patient, waiting for you to give you a fresh start, because you are worth it. So do yourself a favor, courage up. No more excuses, no more justifications, no blaming, no quitting. Lift your head up, rip the cords out of your ears, grab the frickin' pencil, and let's do this.
Courage up. Courage up. Right? There's a lot in this example of care that is about the individual, that is about the bootstraps, right? The phrase, the quotation from Noddings, caring to me. We want to see now some different examples of care in different communities. We've got 4 additional communities, and in no way am I suggesting that that is it. But I did think it was important to show the variation, as well as to try and highlight communities that we have here in Santa Rosa, okay? So in the Black community care, Lisa Delpit in 1995 wrote a book called Other People's Children and took this concept of care and applied it to the Black community. And she said, children will not care how much you know until they know how much you care. You care about them, right? So this is taking it to a different place. This is a relational understanding of care that says, I'll courage up when I know it's safe. I'll courage up when I feel you have my back. Right? So let's watch this video and see the guidance counselors' brief but spectacular 3 minutes on care.
As a guidance counselor at Garrett Middle School in Cobb County, Georgia, John Nwosu works to equip his students with the tools to succeed in and out of the classroom. Tonight, he gives us his brief but spectacular take on advocating for equity in the school system.
I'm a school counselor at a middle school. I have a ton of students who enter into the school system behind. From slavery onto Jim Crow, onto redlining and the GI Bill only being given to certain groups and not others. And then if you fast forward to now, we have mass incarceration, we have the war on drugs that's, disproportionately impact other communities. And instead of kind of looking at that storyline leading up to now, we kind of just say sometimes that they just don't have it, or those kids can't behave, or those kids don't have people who care about them. And I think it's so much deeper and more complex than that. You can't just talk about school in school because people show up, sometimes they didn't eat, or sometimes they got into an argument with their parents before they get to school, and that's impacting how they perform in the classroom. So we're trying to have a conversation about grades, but now this person is talking about, oh, I don't get along with my brother or sister, or I had an issue with my friend. If you look at the data, you see situations where some groups end up doing better than others. And it's a lot of times, at least in part, because people of color or people from other marginalized groups have to go through some of the same issues of proving that they belong in the space. There are teachers who identify things in Black children that they don't in white children who are exhibiting the same behaviors. These are the same teachers who are writing referrals that lead to some students getting in trouble for things that others do not. I've had challenging conversations with the principal in the building. But then I've also worked to be in a position where I can come up with suggestions or bring people in who can come up with suggestions that can create that change. And I try to sit on committees and work in groups where policy is created. What I found is that when we talk about implicit bias, we compare that to things that we intentionally do versus things that we've been automatically conditioned to do. And we can create some dissonance to where people can really begin to question whether or not the things that they say they want to do are in line with the things they're actually doing. And then after we kind of dig into implicit bias, I bring up the explicit stuff, because the part that is often left out is the critical race theory part. The part about the fact that our country was built on racism, and the fact that that stuff still exists today and is perpetuated in really interesting ways. It's like a social faux pas to bring this stuff up. People look uncomfortable. People start fidgeting a little bit when you bring this stuff up. The biggest thing is acknowledging there's a problem. And especially if you're a white person, it's okay to be uncomfortable. We're all consuming these stereotypes and attitudes about race, and you're not a terrible person for having experienced that. My name is John Okechukwu Wonsu Jr., and this is my brief but spectacular take on advocating for equity in the school system.
And it is a valuable take.
Angela Valenzuela, in 1999, took this concept and did an ethnography in Texas and said, what does this look like in my community? In my Latino community, what does care look like? And she said, without care, education loses its soul, its reason for being. So with our first example, we see there's an individual piece to it, the personal. The second, we start to see and notice a relational piece with another. Here we see an extension of that relation to be inclusive of the community. Subtractive Schooling is an amazing book, and I think it's as applicable today in 2024 as it was in 1999. So let's go ahead and see a little video. There's a person in here that some of you might know when you watch this video, okay?
Racial disparity in academic achievement remains one of the leading problems in American education, both at the K through 12 and the college level. A number of studies show greater diversity in the teaching profession can address some of those concerns. Hari Srinivasan has a look at a teacher training program that's aiming to increase diversity in the classroom and improve results all the way through college. It's the latest story in our special series on rethinking college and part of our regular education segment, Making the Grade.
Actually, class, are we subtracting time or adding time? Adding time. We're adding time.
Francisco Martinez will earn his teaching certificate this month, but the 26-year-old teacher-to-be wants to be more to his students.
My goal is to be a good role model.
Martinez, who was born in the U.S. to immigrant parents, says that his own teachers in school were overwhelmingly white. He hopes his background will resonate with elementary school students in Fresno, California, where the district's enrollment is 67% Hispanic.
I feel like I can relate a lot to the students. Some of the experiences they're going through, I've seen myself, and I guess in a sense I can kind of provide another ear or another person to rely on.
Martinez may be right.
I'm going to keep my welcome short because
Cassandra Herring heads an alliance that helps prepare teachers for diverse student classrooms.
we know from research that having a teacher of color actually can move student achievement. It actually can help keep kids in school and persist to college.
According to the National Center for Education Statistics, more than half of all public school students are either racial or ethnic minorities, and that number is only rising. At the same time, 80% of their teachers are white. Experts in higher education are trying to fix that gap.
We need to make sure that every single ed prep program is training every single teacher candidate to bring about student achievement gains for all learners.
While minority students have made gains in recent years, an achievement gap still exists between the races. According to the U.S. Department of Education, in some grades, the gap in reading and math achievement between whites and their Hispanic and black classmates remains in the double digits.
I'm so excited that we are here today for the spring convening.
Herring's alliance, called Branch Ed, launched a new initiative with colleges across the country to improve teacher preparation programs.
When we go into our classrooms, capture what you see and hear teachers saying and doing.
This month, the alliance met in Fresno at Vang Pao Elementary School to observe student-teacher candidates from California State University, Fresno, including Francisco Martinez's class.
How many of us thought that was false? Raise your hand.
Observers used a rubric to assess the role of diversity in teaching and learning.
By looking through the lens of that tool, it gives educators, these faculty, the opportunity to reflect back on what they're doing on their own campuses.
When we come back from our observations, we want to process the information and then go deeper with it.
One observation came from Nikesha Williams, an assistant professor from North Carolina A&T State University.
There was one black female student in the classroom. She did not participate in sharing out. I didn't hear that girl's voice in the classroom holistically at all. There's research that supports this marginalization of black females, particularly as it relates to math. And it struck me that as a teacher, you think about how can you be more inclusive? How can you dispel myths? How can you support this disproportionate representation?
Does teaching need to change as our demographics and as our country changes?
I think it does. I think the race-blind, color-blind, language-blind, culture-blind educational system of the past is failing us. It's obsolete. Because our classrooms are becoming so diverse, to not equip teachers to know how to really leverage that diversity in a positive way to move forward student achievement is only going to increase the achievement gap.
A shift toward what's called culturally responsive teaching, or cultural proficiency, is gaining traction among educators.
What are our attributes that we're measuring?
An attribute is a...
To better serve students of color, teachers create conversation about inequities and cultural relevance.
The time she got on what?
On the bus.
On the bus. Everybody say on the bus.
On the bus.
Francisco Martinez uses Spanish references in his lesson plans.
For example, there was one math lesson I led once. We were working with distances. So I said, so-and-so wants to go get an horchata beverage. how long does so-and-so have to walk to get that beverage? Before I could finish the sentence, so many kids were saying, oh, I've had horchata, horchata is great.
While California State University at Fresno has been successful at recruiting many minority teacher candidates, enrolling African American males is still a challenge.
Let's see hands. Eric, what's different about it?
We do need to improve on how we recruit African American males. I think nationwide that should be at the forefront of the discussion. Most of our students naturally blend into...
Laura Alamillo is the Dean of the School of Education at the university.
And so the work we do in the Kremen School is to make sure that all of our educators come out fully prepared to work.
She recently visited local black churches to try and attract more African Americans toward a teaching career.
I think it's time to reach out to this particular community to see if maybe I could spark some interest. It's not only the presence of a teacher of color, it's the lens, it's the mindset of coming with these, just really valuable assets.
What does 1 hour and 30 minutes represent, Leslie?
Ultimately, cultivating great teachers is likely to be the best recruiting tool of all.
Most teachers, if you ask a teacher, why did you become a teacher? Their why is because they had a teacher, one teacher that inspired them, that encouraged them to be the best that they could be and pushed them.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Hari Srinivasan in Fresno, California.
So we've seen 3 videos. We have 2 more. I want to offer you an opportunity to stand up, move your bodies a little bit. This is what I would do in class because that's a lot. So if you need to take a wiggle break for a minute, please do so. All right. Let's continue. So here, also just acknowledging that this is the month of celebration. Thank you, President Medina, for that reminder that this is an important month to honor and celebrate and learn and embrace our API community. This isn't a newer book for me. It's not a new book, but it's a newer book for me. I want to acknowledge that
this is a weak area, an area for me to practice my own growth. I was so moved by Helen Zia's insightful examination of the complexities of the AAPI community that I honestly felt a bit embarrassed that here I have all of the pieces of paper that a university can provide, and yet here's this community where I know very little. So I like to be straight up. This is not an area where I feel I've done enough of my own work, and I'm owning that in a public setting that I want to grow. So yeah. Helen Zia, though, said, our Asian American community deserves to be seen, heard, and valued in all of its complexities. Education is a vital tool in empowering individuals within this diverse community, but it must be sensitive to cultural nuances and historical experiences to truly support and uplift every student. So I said to myself, I got this. I'll go ahead and pull some Hmong, right? Some Vietnamese, Filipino, right? Because if we disaggregate the information, those populations tend to hover in the same area of academic underachievement as Black students and Latino students. So I said, I got this. And I didn't. This gentleman is Korean, and the intersections that he's going to share are pretty powerful. So let's watch this.
What am I gonna do when they tell me you have to go? And they ship me to South Korea and I'm there standing there and I don't know what to do.
Adam Krapser spent his 40th birthday in court, fighting to stay in the only country he knows.
And listen to my voice. I'm an American. I've been here my whole life. I don't know anything else.
Adam and his sister came to the U.S. from South Korea when he was 3 years old. They were later abandoned by their adoptive parents, separated into foster care, and sent on two very different paths. His sister was adopted by a family and got her citizenship. Adam says he ended up with abusive foster parents who neglected to finalize his naturalization. He ended up living on the streets, stealing to survive.
You know, ask yourself as a teenager, you know, what are you gonna do if you need a place to live? You know, what are you gonna do when you wake up in a park and you're wet every day?
Decades later, Krapser is a husband and a father with another baby on the way. When he tried to update his legal status a couple of years ago, his earlier criminal history raised a red flag for immigration authorities. Now he could be deported to South Korea. He doesn't speak Korean and doesn't think he'd survive.
I won't make it if you send me. So you're sentencing me to death for crimes I've already done hard time for.
In 2000, Congress passed a bill making all international adoptees automatic U.S. citizens, but the law was not made retroactive. That leaves scores of other adoptees at the risk of deportation.
This case is compelling for so many reasons. The Child Citizenship Act should be amended to include kids who were over 18 in 2001 when it was enacted.
Senator Jeff Merkley supports Krapser's fight to stay in the U.S. and is taking action on Capitol Hill. He and another senator are proposing a standalone bill to extend U.S. citizenship to all international adoptees. For Krapser, the stakes couldn't be higher.
Whatever they want me to do, I'll do it, you know, but I need to stay here for my family. Like, it's imperative.
This man is no longer with us. I want to take a moment and honor his words, his life. He was deported. There's an hour-long video that I would encourage you all to see at some point. Um, he was forced to go to Korea where he didn't speak the language. He got lost. He gave it his best. He was there and he was alone. And he did take his life. And I want for us to hold him in our conscience as we're doing this work. I want us to think about his young children who are amongst us, right? They are children in the classroom who the stereotype would have us say, you're going to do great in math. You don't need our help. You got this. But behind those stereotypes, what do we know? Some of these students in the AAPI community are invisible and are having to live up to a stereotype that for some of us seems positive, but in fact, does it erase and deny? And so while we're thinking about care and we're thinking about relation and we're thinking about communal, are we thinking about collective? Okay. What do our teachers know about the Child Citizenship Act? I'll be straight up. What did I know about the Child Citizenship Act? My own privilege with my US documentation doesn't mean I have to know. How many of us don't have to know, but need to know? So, just a second of silence. Thank you. The last video, care in the Native American community. Winona LaDuke. There are a lot of books out there about Native Americans to help Native Americans. But being sure that they are by Native Americans, not so many. So LaDuke is intentional, right? Probably one of the most famous Native Americans. But how can we uplift our Pomo people here so that they can be future authors writing about Santa Rosa and their experiences? In our strategic priorities, how can we hold space for our future authors? True education is not about assimilation, it's about empowerment. It's about creating spaces where Indigenous youth can learn and thrive, drawing from their own cultural traditions, languages, and ways of knowing. Education should honor the wisdom of our ancestors while preparing our youth to be leaders who can navigate the challenges of today and tomorrow with strength and resiliency. 1999.
What you need is your notebooks and then the reading material. Those of you who participate in your sort of ceremonial practices, religious practices back home, right? When you are participating in these things, do they speak English? No, they don't speak English, right? How does that make you feel in those settings? The main thing that brought me here to NACA was the movement that was happening around this school.
I don't want to use safe space, but like safe space.
If I were to describe NACA to someone who has no idea what the school is or the name, I would just say a safe place for natives.
The Native American Community Academy, also known as NACA, is situated in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
NACA is a school for indigenous youth that has more of an indigenized curriculum.
It's a school founded on community and culture and respect. I'm from the Pueblo of Jemez up north.
And I'm from the Pueblos of Cochiti and San Felipe. I'm a junior here at NACA.
So my first year at NACA was last year, my freshman year. I really did not know what to expect, but right away I gained a sense of community. It just made me feel like I had a sense of home at school.
I'm half-breed. I'm a mutt, as some elementary students would call me. I got bullied a lot about, being native or being white. Going into NACA, it was different. The first year wasn't too different. I still got bullied pretty heavily for being white, and then the teachers helped me out a lot.
Next question, what is one issue that sort of just makes you angry? Could be anything. I think it's important for students to have access to teachers who share their knowledge and innately understand the cultural and the social issues that they go through.
I belong somewhere when somebody gives me the opportunity to explain fully what my feelings are first without trying to talk over or explain to me what my feelings are.
I feel like I've grown to respect my culture and community and traditions more. I'm just grateful that I'm allowed to express my cultural identity at this school.
Community means to be with each other and to be able to talk with each other, laugh with each other, because that's how it is in Jemez for me. Wherever you go, you hear the sound of laughter and it just makes you feel at home.
Having the support of everyone and being given wonderful opportunities just to speak and share our stories helped me feel a little bit more connected and confident in who I am.
The school supports me, doesn't restrict my curriculum. They allow me to be creative. Is there any time in your speaking to people where you felt like you were misunderstood? But also just interacting with the community here. There's so much laughter here that you get, and that just feeds me every day, right? And then we get to eat together like a family. We sing together, we talk together. That sort of makes me come back consistently to work.
I was very disconnected for the longest time in my life. I was super against being native. I hated everyone. I constantly got into fights. Looking back on it now, I kind of realized just how sad and alone I was. And NACA was kind of a reason why I'm able to stand proud and say I am native. My name is Remy Thonis.
My name is Bryant Ramon.
My name is Neva Anderson.
My name is Makeda Kazakito.
My name is Arlen John, and this is my brief but spectacular take on creating a culture of belonging.
Culture of belonging, someone mentioned that. Yeah. So, I want to ask you all, not to put you on the spot, but were there any phrases that stood out to you, either as something that resonated for you, was true of you, your culture, or felt just the opposite, maybe hit you wrong, didn't resonate with you? Yes, De La Torre.
I care about you more than you may care about yourself.
Say that one more time.
I care about you more than you may care about yourself.
So I care about you maybe more than you care about yourself. And why did that resonate for you? Or not, whichever, not sure.
So it resonated for me just for the understanding of what a lot of children, underprivileged children, are dealing with in our active, current, everyday 2024 society in our school systems. That resonated with me because it's something that I went through in my life. So having teachers, adults, mentors, administrators that care about these students more than they understand what care truly means for themselves, believing in them. and trusting them, lifting them up. So it really struck a personal chord for my journey and how important it is of why I'm sitting in this seat to do this work, because of all the students that still need that today.
Thank you. We're also going to try and keep our comments to 3 minutes. And that was amazing. That was so under 3 minutes. So just wanted to say that because I forgot to, but if we can try and keep them to 3 minutes. Thank you. Others?
Trustee La Cruz.
I really resonated with that kind of the relationship between dissonance and discomfort. So like it's super uncomfortable to hear dissonance all the time, right? And that's what people of color inside of systems are constantly feeling. And to have that Black counselor really kind of highlight like, so when we raise the dissonance is when the discomfort is created, but like that recognition and that just hit in all the right ways is like that dissonance, that hypocrisy, the using all the words and then not doing the things, or using the words and having them mean something completely and totally opposite, like that hurts your ears, right? As someone with integrity, and as, you know, as a person of color in this world, watching the harm that's created every day and caused, right? And then to have that come back at you as like, you are making me uncomfortable. That hit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Then I had
It's that
just
dissonance
Trustee
piece.
Sheffield.
That dissonance piece. Yeah.
I'm trying my best to keep it under 3.
No pressure.
You know, Dr. J, we met a couple weeks ago, and you had brought up Nell Noddings at the time, and when I was in graduate school, I did done a study on No Child Left Behind, and looking at examining the word care and what that means in different communities, particularly what it means in the education in the school community, because we have to have all of this. Care means more because there's so much more at stake than it does in the general population. And your and my discussion sort of centered around being in a community where folks do feel uncomfortable having necessary conversations. And it was in a couple of these, but I think it was in the it was with the school counselor, John, you know, who said it. It's okay to be uncomfortable. When we live in a community, I think the one clip had 80% of teachers are white. It's higher than that in Sonoma County, definitely. But it's okay to be uncomfortable when you're coming from care, and you have to open yourself up to to see the other side, to see all of this, to see the other perspectives, to see culture, to understand that community means something different. Care means something different in different communities, and communities within the education world, school communities, encompasses everything. 3 minutes?
Next, I have Trustee Flores.
Thank you. Where's the timer? All right. Well, there it is. I see it now. All right. So I don't know how to put this into words, but you know, one of the words that I mentioned here earlier today was agency, right? How do we encourage our students to build that self-reliance, that agency? Living in a predominantly white culture, right? You see video number 1 where there is a lot of good intent, and I mean, it was heartfelt. I felt it. Just put that into context, right? With the rest of the videos that were about communal and relational building, right? To build that agency, and instead of me telling you how to do this, right? Making sure that students are aware that this is, this is a community and this is how you become part of the community, right? It's diametrically, different points of views, right? That I think it's important to take into account. That the vast majority of our students are students of color, right? And having that background, that relational sort of building, might be kind of subversive sort of thinking, in white America, right? So, because we're so entrenched into the idea of making sure that, we tell you what to do and how to do it, instead of letting individuals grow by being there and helping them build that sort of agency. I have 50 seconds left. And then the other thing I want to say is that in video number 2, the importance of implicit bias, that discussion about being able to be uncomfortable and being okay in terms of being uncomfortable, because the discussion about implicit bias is difficult to do, especially in a profession that is predominantly white, right? And our students are predominantly, students of color. So how do we engage that conversation to ensure that, we have an open set of relationship in terms of discussing the ability to feel uncomfortable, right? And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm just saying that we come from different, places. 4 seconds. Okay, I'll shut up now.
Trustee McNally?
Thank you. I'll share a couple words that I bristled at. The first was resilient. I think I bristled at that because maybe we shouldn't be teaching our students to be resilient. Maybe we should be taking care of them so that they don't have to be resilient. And I know to some extent that might be semantic in the way you're saying the word care is semantic for different groups. Maybe that speaker meant resilient in a different way than I'm projecting on him, but that was my reaction to it. And then the other one was achievement gap. And that one stands out to me as something that, even though in the video they were talking about it in context, and even if we are talking about it in context, sometimes the person listening doesn't hear the context. All they hear is the phrase achievement gap. And then that can place blame on the group experiencing that gap rather than the context that created it. So, I don't know, another term that I've heard before is education debt. I don't know if that would be more accurate, or if there are other terms that are even more recent. But yeah, those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to try to be fast and short because I'm going to be all over the place. Following up on the caring more than the student cares about themselves, to me, I thought about the fact that maybe how they express how they care for themselves is different in the sense that they don't realize how being engaged is a different form of caring for themselves that has that that's that short pain for the long gain. That's what they said. I really like this idea of not letting quitting be easy as the district caring by making it difficult for them to quit. There was this idea of challenging and pushing students, which takes me to this idea that I always feel that our students are capable of so much more, and there's this lowered expectations for them that I often feel that's even tied to this like achievement gap that simultaneously to me I see as sometimes like the self-fulfilling prophecy. Like we're not going to achieve, we don't achieve, so we're already expected to be at a lower level. The second video, I was so into it that I didn't write anything down, but critical race theory I thought was essential. In the third video, the idea of role models, cultural responsive teaching was important. I watched it yesterday and I reached out to Laura Lamillo and I'm like, I saw you in the video. She's like, I know so much about this. We'll talk later. There was the idea of privilege in terms of privilege of citizenship. And I think how important that concept is, not just in terms of immigration, but just privilege in so many different levels, that I think it's important to recognize and acknowledge in terms of how we develop policy and how we try to do things. The students talking about access to teachers that share their knowledge, respecting culture, being able to express your identity, all those things were really important. But feeling at home, being able to share our stories, those were things that stood out. The one student that said that in reflecting, seeing that he was sad and alone in terms of how he expressed himself, that really stood out. But I think you talked about the cultural belonging, and I think how do we create that culture? Those were all the things that kind of really stood out, and the idea of conquering adversity being kind of the main event. And scene.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to speak? Do you want to speak or? Okay. So, thank you. Thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you for speaking your courage, your truth. Let's get this into those words. No. Let's get this into the living, breathing of our words. Care. I summarized the 5 books and wrote this as articulated by educational scholars, Noddings, Delpit, Valenzuela, Zia, Leduc, embodies a critical aspect of educational practice and ethical decision-making. Noddings emphasizes care as a dynamic and reciprocal relationship, urging educators to attentively address the diverse needs of their students. Delpit underscores the importance of culturally responsive teaching, advocating for educators to create inclusive learning environments that honor students' cultural identities and experiences. Valenzuela extends this perspective by highlighting the collective responsibility of schools and communities to address systemic inequalities and promote social justice. Zia emphasizes the multifaceted complexities and importance of visibility. Leduc reminds us caring spaces are relational and culturally inclusive. Thus, care in education encompasses nurturing inclusive relationships, nurturing inclusive relationships, culturally responsive practices, and collaborative efforts to ensure every student's well-being and academic success. So, a lot going on here, a lot of passion, a lot of care, a lot of truth. I stuck in with education. I wasn't going to be an educator at all. I had no interest. I stuck in it because I saw the inequities. I saw the injustices. I saw that the kids in East Palo Alto did not have the same experience in kindergarten that I had had. And I wanted to be sure that they got something better, that they got my best. When I look back at what my best was at 23 years old, and now that I'm 25, right? um, you know, I thought lining up, and I mean, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I have to say it, and I say this to my classes when I'm teaching. I thought lining up with your hands behind your back and walking down the line that split the cement meant I was doing a good job, that my kids were quiet all the way to the bathroom, right? That stood up against the wall, didn't poke each other. And guess what? My principal did too, because I started as a substitute teacher. I started on an emergency teaching credential. I was invited back because I was so darn good at keeping those kids quiet, right? And I look back and I think, wow, every single one of my kids could read by the end of kindergarten. Every one of my kids, I had visited their homes by the end of that year. But I did that because one day I was so proud of the way I was teaching, I invited my dad to my classroom. And my dad owned a barbecue restaurant in town and had gone to 8th grade. And that's when he stopped. He was born in 1920s, okay, older. Grew up in Tennessee. And you know what he said after watching me, who wasn't, I thought I was doing a good job. He said, baby, that looks a lot like my own schooling, where we weren't allowed to talk, where we were afraid of our teacher. Oh my God. I hadn't even seen that that's what I was doing. I was elevating the wrong message to these babies, that if you're quiet, that if you're dutiful, that if you do as I say, not as I do, right? That this grit, this tough love was going to turn their worlds around, right? I had so many assumptions about their families, that they needed to work harder, that they needed to show up at night for, you know, back to school. I had all of those. And my dad saying that to me, I was like, whoa. And that's when I invested the time and I went and I entertained a different type of care. One that I knew, because that was my dad, but one I had learned out of myself. In learning to be a good teacher, I had taken that out of me. And I had denied me to my students. I want us to think about loving on our teachers as we're doing this work as well. How many of our teachers believe in their heart of hearts what I just shared? And just need that, you know, hey, you want to speak?
I was just in my mind trying to understand, like believing that you're doing right, but the system has taught you what right is, but right isn't necessarily right. And so you might actually be doing harm. That idea?
That's it. That's it. And you don't even know it. And that hurts, right? And I think that you all invited me to be this person because you knew I was going to get up here and do something a little different, right? I do this because I believe so much in the power of our teachers, in the power of our system to do better, right? I keep saying better. I want to be here to help in any way, shape, or form that I can. But I have to own that that was me. And I had learned that that was right. And for some of the kids, maybe it was right. Who knows? But it wasn't right for all of them. And so, yeah, this was me. Schooling often asks children to be something or someone other than who they really are. It asks them to use language other than the one they come to school with. It asks them to dismiss their community and cultural knowledge. It erases the things that the students hold dear. We want to be additive. I love what McNally had to share. There were some pieces there that were about what can we do differently? What's the language? How can we still have that piece of care that you started us with, right? How can we have agency? How can we make sure that that's part of the curriculum? How can we see care in the complexities so that this message is a thing of the past? Yeah? Next steps. Respect. I asked and encouraged us all to hold space for respecting the process, the time, the people, the love, the passion that went into the development. And as we're doing that, to think about care as nurturing inclusive relationships, culturally responsive practice, collaborative effort, and how do you know and monitor and message this? How will you know it? How will you see it? How will you identify it? Patty knows it. Patty identifies it. Patty messages it. Patty's the bomb. Patty's a crossing guard in Ukiah. And I'm going to go to her street at 7:30 in the morning one day and chill with Patty because Patty lives our truth, our care. She lives it. She shows it. And what I bring this up, I bring Patty to our consciousness because I believe that our Patties want to be the messengers of our priorities. If we write our priorities in a way that is what you all just shared, they'll roll off people's tongues. We, right, Dr. Jones, shouldn't be the messenger. I shouldn't be the only one who can recite our goals. We want to make sure that Patty recites our goals. Why? Because in this video, you're going to see a woman with a pink scarf around her neck. She doesn't know me. She doesn't care about me, but she knows Patty. And she lives in the community. And she's going to see on her ballot something about, parcel taxes. And if we do this right, Patty is going to be our best messenger for Pink Scarf Lady. We're not going to be the ones saying, you need to pass the parcel tax because look at the budget, right? But because she sees Patty every morning and Patty says, good morning, she trusts Patty. So if Patty says this is a good idea and this supports our goals in these ways, she's going to say, oh yeah. That's what we want to make sure we do with our goals, that they resonate, that they are real, that they don't use highfalutin language that nobody understands, right? Inclusive. So let's watch Patty.
What gets me out of bed every morning is the thought of not being there, saying hello to everybody. It doesn't matter if it's cold, hot, wind, rain, you still show up for work and you perform your job to the best of your ability and be happy doing it. Morning. My name is Patty Dow. I'm a crossing guard at Frank Zeke Elementary. After the first time I substituted, I called my son and say, honey, I think I want to do this crossing guard. It's great exercise and the people are great, children are great, and it felt great. Sweet. My daily schedule as a crossing guard begins at 7 a.m. Basically, I don my jacket, grab my sign, gloves on, and I head straight out to the corner. We start the day with great smile, positive attitude, and it just reflects on everybody. It's great start to the morning. I look forward to it every morning. It's just like your cardio. Beats joining the gym. The intersection of Bush and Low Gap, that's my intersection. It is so important to have a crossing guard at the location I'm at now. It is really hectic and busy there, so having me there assures the safety of the children crossing, not only the children, but pedestrians and cars alike sometimes. Nice out here, huh?
Yeah, it is very nice. It's gonna be a great day.
Beautiful. You too, thank you. My duties, I feel, are as important as the teachers during school hours. But as a crossing guard, I see the children before and after school, and I follow up on how their day is. It's just as important because I really do follow up on them. Have a great day. And again, we're leaving school and I yell, see you tomorrow. I mean it. Be here tomorrow because I'm going to be here tomorrow. And they yell back, see you tomorrow. I'm hardly gone. I would not miss work because I said I'll be here tomorrow. I always know that they're happy to see me, and that's that peace of mind I think I help the parents with. I can't tell you how that feels. It just feels so good that you can make an impact on someone's day like that. This is a place to be at. If you are considering a position as a crossing guard, first and foremost is your relationship to the children and the people, and I think that makes a big impact on how you perform your duties. Everyone here is just so supportive of it. They're so happy. They make me feel so appreciated and loved and valued for what you're doing out there. It's just a great way to start the day, and I look forward to it. Bye.
School crossing guard.
Relationships, supportive, appreciated, loved, valued, right? How many of Patties are out there at where is she? Low Gap and Bush, right? We've got this. We've got this. You all may not be old enough to remember, but when I was growing up, we didn't have a whole lot of books in our house. Okay, we had no books in our house, but we had a lot of love and we had a lot of care. And one of the ways that my family showed that was we would sit down and watch like Jeopardy and game shows together. And right about 9 o'clock, which was my bedtime, Cheers would come on. So I never really actually saw a full segment of Cheers when I was growing up, but I used to see and hear the song that started Cheers. And I'll tell you, that still is my truth. I want to be where everybody knows my name. I want to be where people are all the same. I want to go to those places. And I believe that when we think about this night, and we hold and embrace those truths, we will have a simplified version that Patty, as well as our students, will be able to message and celebrate. So before we open this up to whatever y'all want to do next, I want to close with cheers.
Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? All those nights when you've got no lights, the check is in the mail, and your little angel hung the cat up by its tail, and your third fiance didn't show. Sometimes
Sorry. You want to go? That's what it was about to say. Where everybody knows your name, where they're always glad you came, right? You want to be where people see troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. Let's see if it'll show the rest. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think my first question is just some kind of understanding. What is I think you mentioned like this is all going to be kind of put together and brought back in some sort of proposal. Just kind of want to understand that next step.
Can I just share a reflection first? I'm trying to keep myself together, because when we started this presentation, and thank you, Dr. Jones, I don't think we've ever heard, or I will speak for myself, each of our priorities through the voice of a child. It just hits really differently. And I feel like some of it becomes irrelevant to what our kids really need, right? And we have to express things in a way that also makes sense as adults. But if we are student-centered, then we need to be using terms that our students understand. Because if we're talking about every person in our system knowing and connecting, we have to understand the language that we use. And each of the interpersonal stories that we heard afterwards reinforces that when we say that we're building relationships, what do we mean by that? Because we've also been blasted for encouraging and continuing to encourage that to the point that it becomes a numb word. But I would challenge that unless we understand every child's background, what they were dealing with before they came to school, what they're about to go to after school, what is worrying them, if we don't know those things and we still have the audacity to name call in a classroom, this is not the profession for you. I'm saying this because as we navigate the potential of revision of our goals, of our priorities, we have to think through the lens of how do these words manifest into our work. We often say what we put in is what we get out. And so if our goals are so robust that we can't even make the connections or really understand what the priorities are, then we will be all over the place. And while I also kind of live in an all over the place sort of mindset, because we have to do a lot of things all at the same time, the optics of that, right, don't necessarily make those connections. So part of our next steps first was to just really set the stage, and thank you, Dr. Jones, for doing that. Getting some initial thinking from the board on what words resonate with us, what are some things that seem to be missing, right? And I think, honestly, this needs to marinate. This needs to marinate. We don't have many participants today, but this is recorded. I think we should actually send this recording out so that more of our community is able to watch it and digest it as well. And I know the board has a time frame to continue doing this work through the beginning part of fall. So I think part of the question tonight is, I guess the first obvious question is, do you want to keep the priorities the way that they are written? Honoring fully the work that happened before, right? Not discrediting that in any way. But do you want to go ahead and approve them as is for another 5 years? And does 5 years make sense? We've gotten into a cadence of that, right? Do you want to continue to explore these priorities and do some additional workshop or study sessions to drill down even further? A big important part of this work that we must do, I feel, is the metrics. How are we measuring progress of the priorities, right? We've done that loosely through making connections on our board agendas. And we will take time to do some work to tally, if you will, how often have each of the priorities been connected to an agenda item, which is a connection to the board's work and direction, right, to the superintendent and to district staff. So there are a few questions in that, and I'll hand it back to you, President Medina.
Thank you, Superintendent Janelle. Well, first off, I'll open it up for the board. Trustee La Torre.
Wow. Dr. Jones, thank you. What beauty. The thing that resonates most with me is the heart. And as I speak to the heart, something that I would also like to continue to marinate with us as we go through this process is some things I heard tonight. Move on from the pain, hurt, and damage. Move forward together. To adequately do that is to speak in a language that all understand. These priorities are not written for us. They're not written for the highest educated in the room. They are being written for those in the process of education. And our students should understand what words we're using and why we're using them. So it's not to prove who's got the highest education in the room and the strongest vocabulary, but it's what resonates the most, what's going to encourage the most positive steps. So no, it shouldn't be status quo. It should be changed. And something that I've been working on over the past few months that I really think deserves a moment in this conversation is why are we taking these steps? Why are we putting this work in? Is we use our hearts and we don't vilify others in this conversation to prove our point. There will be no vilifying of behavior, races, community. Nobody's looking for a bad guy in this conversation. We are all looking for ways to heal and grow. So do not take any indication to say, this is what's wrong. Here's some guilt, here's some shame, here's some blame. Bad you. how are we using these conversations to grow and learn and lead by example for the rest of our SRCS community of what we truly wish to embody and how we wish to move forward.
Thank you, Trustee La Torre. Trustee La Cruz?
Thank you so much for bringing what it really looks like to center equity in a giant picture conversation. We talk about it a lot, like what does it mean to center equity? What does it mean to have that be right in the middle of what it is that we do? We talk about that as a board a lot. And I really want to thank you, Superintendent Chanel, for your leadership in making sure that this was the conversation that we had tonight as we set our priorities, because that is really walking our talk. And I'm really grateful for the way that that came to us tonight. I just want to say that, yes, absolutely, it is time to rewrite these. I think this was like my first meeting on this board was writing these in 2019. And when I think about what we've learned together and how much has changed in our community, as well as what our experiences together as a board, have been those folks who wrote those words then and how different this board looks and feels now. It is really time to rewrite them. So I definitely want to continue workshopping these and think that it's a really good way to also have this carved out time. I really love the special board meetings. It's worth the extra meeting or two to really be able to focus and have conversations that we desperately need to have together. So would love to do that. One of the things that we did at the Office of Equity, because essentially what we're doing is we're also educating ourselves and our community in the ways in which we use words and what the words mean, right? So it's a way of really kind of addressing the dissonance that can happen. I think it's really critical for us to, even with the simplest words, to define them. And so I would really recommend that, as we think about our values or the words that we want to use as we set these new priorities, to also make sure that we have a conversation about the ways in which we define them. And that we can continue kind of holding ourselves and our larger community accountable to what the words mean when we say them. And then, so I kind of would appreciate even maybe kind of like pulling out a little bit bigger to saying like, what are the words, the values, right? The definitions of those words and or the values, and then to set those priorities. And then I just want to also call in that it is an equity practice to do this work with community. And so even if it is a small working group of students, of staff, of parents who want to kind of lean in on this with us, Dr. Jones, I just love the way that children's voices were in your work tonight, and that is so critical, right? That always comes to this board so differently and so much more powerfully when the folks that we're working for are right here in the middle of the room. And the metrics conversation, absolutely. Equity requires accountability. There isn't one without the other. And so if we're truly centering it, then we're also holding ourselves accountable to it. There's a lot of great tools that have been developed across the country around how to set metrics and then kind of report out, keep that transparency going, and keep the focus on doing the stuff that we say we want to do. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee La Cruz. Other board members, Trustee Sheffield.
Just a couple of things, and complete agreement, Alegria. It's been 5 years, and you came on as we were already in the process of looking at what board priorities are. So I am all in favor. I love the student voices and framing things in their voice. I appreciate you, Dr. Jones, for giving us a lens to approach this task of evaluating, reassessing, tooling, workshopping our priorities. A lot has happened since 2019. A lot has happened in the world. A lot has happened in this country, and I think that there there's kind of an awakening. I kind of think that's where we're at right now as a community. I do hope that as we move forward in whatever process we choose to do, that we invite the community to be present, to participate, but with a real emphasis on the student voices, the student community as being a part of the process. We have a lot of good intentions. I think that our existing board strategy priority rainbow, there was a lot of thought put into that as well, and a lot of good intentions. But things change and perspectives change, and we could look at it through a new lens.
Thank you, Trustee Sheffield. Trustee Flores?
First of all, Dr. Jones, thank you so much for this very beautiful and touching, presentation with love and intentionality. I just want to say thank you. During our pre-meetings, I mentioned that back in 2018, 2019, as a member of the community, I remember going to one of these events where, the school district was collecting information from community members, right? So I attended one that it was for Spanish-speaking, community members. And one of my suggestions was that we needed to make our language accessible, reasonable, understandable, and measurable, right? And I just want to say thank you because, as we grow, it tells me that, we are moving towards a place where we are becoming, more student-centered and putting those voices and perspective with intentionality, right? To me, that as a school counselor, that just means the world to me. I also did share that, I thought our 7 priorities were a little bit confusing, and not, they were well written and with good intentions, right? But when you ask folks, what those priorities are, I would be very surprised to know that, you would be very surprised to know that pretty much no one actually knows what those priorities are. And if we are going to have priorities set by the district, it should be a common language. It should be something that we all know. It should be something that, you're right, that Patty should be able to say in a 25-second elevator pitch, right? It needs to be accessible to everyone in the community, not just those few folks that are here pretty much twice a month, for 3 to 4 hours. Yeah. So I'm with the rest of the board members that I think it's time to revamp the priorities into a more succinct, and more relational view. So thank you.
Trustee McNally, did you want to say anything? Or okay. Superintendent Ternell-Scott, I was going to ask for a couple questions, but I think she mentioned the timeline. I think in my head, I liked the idea if we could have something done where we could kind of like roll it out and present it to the school community at back to school nights in September. But that might be too soon. We might not be able to do that, right? Depends on how this process goes. But when she mentioned the timeline, I think she was kind of alluding to that. So I just wanted to make sure that the board knew where that came from. Um, yeah, I think this is what we have now. It's definitely too much. You know, when I got onto the board, this was early on in the beginning of me serving on the board, and I remember it was just us trying to pack so many things into already existing categories. And I think we added this priority 7 at the end because, like, oh yeah, we need money. Let's do something about meeting these needs. But yeah, it's not, I want to say user friendly. I liked the slide that you had about keeping things student centered. I think keeping that as the focus to me is really important. As we watched the videos, one of the thoughts that the ideas that came out was the idea of students being able to be themselves. And I thought of the idea of like, what is SRCS? And like from a student perspective, like SRCS is me. How can like our priorities kind of reflect that is what I was thinking in my head. I did want to ask Superintendent for now in terms of, as we move forward, things that I would like to know in terms of metrics. If maybe we could have like a list or an understanding of what are the things that we already have access to measure? Like what metrics can we already measure in some form or another? And having that list might help us understand maybe what we don't have access to that we may want to measure as we move forward. I like what Trustee Sheffield said about like student input and community input. I think that's really important. One of the things that I've really been thinking about being important is an idea of kind of like what the superintendent has of like a council of sorts of advisors. Idea of like the president's council of advisors, but students from all the schools. And I think right now, thinking about students going through elections in other schools, like how can we engage those students to provide input to us? My engagement started in school as a student, and I feel that those student voices are really important. And I think when you create effective mechanisms for them to share their voices, they'll make them heard. If they see that you care and you really listen, they'll engage. And so I want to make sure that we create those opportunities, as we heard a lot earlier. Let's see, what else did I write? I think Trustee La Cruz talked about accountability. And I think this idea of like 5 years maybe being too long, like how do we create maybe points of accountability somehow within the metrics at some point? It's something that I want to make sure that we kind of take into consideration. And I was thinking that it'd be cool. Well, I don't know about cool, but good if maybe as we move on to the next step, if maybe we all just take time to look through these and just think to ourselves, how did we do in all of these? Like, how do we feel about that? Just to contemplate those thoughts. And the idea of looking at that came to me from the idea of like, let's not look back, because I think it's important to look back sometimes and see how we failed. The point about the colorblind, everything blind system failing made me think of that sometimes we have to learn from our failures, and we can't learn from them if we ignore them. So we got to look at where we failed so we could understand how we could improve. So these are all just random thoughts of Omar Medina that have come in this process. And the other thing that I was going to ask is, maybe within the next couple of days, we could just like get all this stuff typed out and sent to the board members so that we could be able to review it without having to rewatch the video.
You know, first off, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate them. And metrics is a way of involving the community. So if I may just offer an idea, which is having your words be brief but impactful in their execution. So just entertain this for a second with me. Here we go. So taking, for instance, nurturing inclusive relationships and asking, going back to the community and saying, what does that look like? And doing almost an environmental scan that says, what does that look like for a teacher in the lower grades, in the middle grades, in the high school? What does that look like for our students? What does it look like for our yard duties? What does it look like for our crossing guards? But almost asking them for the measures and the metrics of how one in that environment would understand nurturing inclusive relationships. Is a way of involving the community in a substantive part of the process. Because if they are only involved in the language and the wordsmithing, then we're still losing sight of what does this look like? How does this feel in your day in, day out experiences? So there's a process called the inquiry cycle, cycle of inquiry, and it kind of talks about, you know, trying something, observing, trying something, coming back and observing it, and then reporting out, you know. And so having fewer words, but having them able to mean more. Am I making sense in that regard?
I think another beautiful way to think about that, Dr. Jones, and to all of us is these priorities are great. This list of priorities is great, but the priorities will only hold true value if we actively, actionably prioritize them. And they should be the priority of the whole community, not just us as a board, not just as our educators, not just for our students, but for our families, our community members. These should be a priority for the community as a whole. And we should be able to be a leading by example of why we are prioritized and show that we are prioritizing them. And they're not just a list that looks good at a meeting, but that is something that we take to heart and we expect our families to take to heart. And that's where the impact will come from. That's where the engagement will come from. That's where the strides for our students will come from, is when everybody's involved.
Even something like care, you know, just taking care. What does care look like to the middle schooler? You know, less bullying. What does that care look like for the kindergartner? More sharing. What does it look like for the high schooler? I don't know, but you know what I mean? What does it look like for the teacher? What does it look like for the principal toward the teacher? What is care? And being able to simplify the language, but allowing it to hold truths that are diverse and are relevant to the individuals. It, it's a little more nuanced, but the metrics then have a through line, a continuity with the actual people who were asking to use the language.
I think, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here, is that eventually once we collectively come up with this, I think the idea of following up and looking at everything we do, and seeing how is it aligned with those priorities. And it takes me back to Margie's comments earlier, the idea of like, how do we really prioritize, and maybe especially thinking in the context of like cuts, how do we cut what's not part of these priorities or isn't aligned with those priorities in terms of the difficult decisions that we have to make ahead? Any? No. I've got nothing else. Unless you.
I think for the final next steps is after this meeting, I will work with the board president and the board vice president to talk about calendaring, and obviously with Dr. Jones, so that we can continue these discussions. We are moving into June and July, so we have to talk about availability of time and space and calendars to be able to discuss this and not lose the momentum. Also, how do we gather additional individuals so that we are bringing in that voice and having those individuals a part of the work.
Thank you, Superintendent Turnell. And thank you, Dr. Jones. Greatly appreciate your work and the different staff from my last experience to get this work started.
I'm happy to take these and type them because then I can mull it over and meet with y'all. Say that one more time. Sorry.
Logistics. If you're wanting to type them up, that's wonderful. Thank you. And then send them to me and I'll send them to the board. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any last remarks, board members? If not, thank you, and meeting adjourned.